Hey y'all, it's Kim again. So this is the Steele dossier, or the like Benny Johnson, I think, calls it the PP dossier. But anyway, I think Hillary Clinton's campaign paid for this, and the reason I'm bringing it up again is because Trump is now saying that the Epstein files would have been manufactured, kind of like this Steele dossier. I'm just reading through it. Make of it whatever you will. I mean, I'm not happy about the way this is rolling out with the Epstein stuff, but whatever. So let's read through this. The thing that I look at is that we can always have a special prosecutor come back and say, okay, this is incorrect. This was manufactured by these people. I mean, I've think I've posted enough videos for right now, and I've still got more information to post of just different documents that show that there was other people like kind of involved with the Epstein stuff, but they want to play us for stupid. So I'm just gonna keep posting what I can. I think there's enough evidence there. But anyway, so since Trump is saying all this stuff is manufactured, let's just get through the Steele dossier. Then I'll go through like the Durham report and just, make sure I'm showing both sides of this. The Durham report, I do believe, was it the Mueller or Durham? One of the reports was actually to counteract the Steele dossier. It was like 300 something pages where they had investigated it. I think that's what it is. Hold on, I had to look at my different ones. Oh yeah, Durham report. This thing right here. As far as I know, that's what the hell this is supposed to be. So we're just gonna roll with it. We'll go through it and make sure that I'm correct on that. I could have sworn that was the one that counteracted this, what they call PP report. But anyway, yeah, still dossier. But let's go on. So it says Russia, USA growing backlash in Kremlin to DNC hacking and Trump support operations. A summary head of PA Ivanov laments Russian intervention in U.S. presidential election and black PR against Clinton and the DNC, vows not to supply intelligence to Kremlin PR operatives again, and advocates now sitting tight and denying everything. Uh, Presidential spokesman Peskov, the main protagonist in Kremlin campaign to aid Trump and damage Clinton, he's now scared and fears being made a scapegoat by leadership for backlash in U.S. problem, compounded by his botched intervention in recent Turkish crisis. Premier Medvedev's office, furious over DNC hacking and associated anti-Russian publicity, want good relations with U.S. and ability to travel there, refusing to support or help cover up for Peskov. Talk now in Kremlin of Trump withdrawing from presidential race altogether, but this still largely wishful thinking by more liberal elements in Moscow. Detail, speaking in early August of 2016, two well-placed and established Kremlin sources outline the divisions and backlash in Moscow arising from the leaking of Democratic National Committee or DNC emails and the wider pro-Trump operations being conducted in U.S. head of presidential administration. Sergei Ivanov was angry at the recent turn of events. He believed the Kremlin team involved, led by presidential spokesperson or spokesman Dmitry Peskov, had gone too far in interfering in foreign affairs with their elephant in a china shop black PR. Ivanov claimed always to have opposed the handling and exploitation of intelligence by the PR team. Following the backlash against such foreign interference in U.S. politics, Ivanov was advocating that the only sensible course of action now for the Russian leadership was to sit tight and deny everything. Continuing on this theme, the source close to Ivanov reported that Peskov now is scared shitless that he would be scapegoated by Putin and the Kremlin and held responsible for the backlash against Russian political interference in the U.S. election. Ivanov was determined to stop Peskov playing an independent role in relation to the U.S. going forward, and the source fully expected the presidential spokesman now to lay low. Peskov's position was not helped by a botched attempt by him also to interfere in the recent failed coup in Turkey from a government relations or GR perspective. No further details. The extent of disquiet and division within Moscow caused by the backlash against Russian interference in the U.S. election was underlined by a second source close to Premier Dmitry Medvedev's or DAM. He said the Russian prime minister and his colleagues wanted to have good relations with the U.S., regardless of who was in power there, and not and not least so as to be able to travel there in future, either officially or privately. They were only refusing to cover up for Peskov and others involved in the DNC Trump operations or to support his counterattack of allegations against the USG for its alleged hacking of the Russian government and state agencies. According to the first source close to Ivanov, there had been talk in the Kremlin of Trump being forced to withdraw from the presidential race altogether as a result of recent events, ostensibly on grounds of his psychological state and unsuitability for high office. This might not be so bad for Russia in the circumstances, but in the view of the source, it remained largely wishful thinking on the part of those in the regime opposed to Peskov and his botched operations, at least for the time being. 5th of August 2016. Russia U.S. presidential election, senior Kremlin figure outlines evolving Russian tactics in pro-Trump, anti-Clinton operation. Head of PA Ivanov assesses Kremlin intervention in U.S. presidential election and outlines leadership thinking on operational way forward. No new leaks envisaged as too politically risky, but rather further exploitation of WikiLeaks material already disseminated to exacerbate divisions. Educated U.S. youth to be targeted as protests against Clinton and swing vote in attempt to turn them over to Trump. Russian leadership, including Putin, celebrated perceived success to date in splitting U.S. hawks and elites. Kremlin engaging with several high-profile U.S. players, including Stein, Page, and former DIA Director Michael Flynn, and funding their recent visits to Moscow. Details speaking in confidence to a close colleague in early August 2016, head of the Russian Presidential Administration, or the PA, Sergei Ivanov, assessed the impact of results of Kremlin intervention in the U.S. presidential election to date. Although most commentators believe that the Kremlin was behind the leaked DNC Clinton emails, this remained technically deniable. Therefore, the Russians would not risk their position for the time being with new leaked material, even to a third party like WikiLeaks. Rather, the tactics would be to spread rumors and misinformation about the content of what already had been leaked and make up new content. Continuing on this theme, Ivanov said that the audience to be targeted by such operations were the educated youth in America, as the PA assessed that there was still a chance they could be persuaded to vote Republican candidate or for Republican candidate Donald Trump as a protest against the Washington establishment in the form of Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. The hope was that even if she won, as a result of this, Clinton in power would be bogged down in working for internal reconciliation in the U.S., rather than being able to focus on foreign policy which would damage Russia's interests. This also should give President Putin more room for maneuver in the run up to Russia's own presidential election in 2018. Ivanov reported that although the Kremlin had underestimated the strength of U.S. media and liberal reaction to the DNC hack and Trump's links to Russia, Putin was generally satisfied with the progress of the anti-Clinton operation to date. He recently had a drink with Putin to mark this. In Ivanov's view, the U.S. had tried to divide the Russian elite with sanctions but failed, whilst they, by contrast, had succeeded in splitting the U.S. hawks inimical to Russia and the Washington elite more generally, half of whom had refused to endorse any presidential candidate as a result of Russian intervention. Speaking separately, also in early August 2016, a Kremlin official involved in U.S. relations commented on aspects of the Russian operation to date. Its goals had been threefold, asking sympathetic U.S. actors how Moscow could help them, gathering relevant intelligence, and creating and disseminating compromising information or compromat that had involved the Kremlin supporting various U.S. political figures, including funding directly their recent visits to Moscow. He named a delegation from Lyndon LaRoche, presidential candidate Jill Stein of the Green Party, Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page, a former DIA director, Michael Flynn in this regard, and as a successful in terms of perceived outcomes. This is 10th of August 2016. This isn't very well written, I'll just say that. And this guy's supposed to be what do you call it? An ex-spy. Where am I at? Let me go back. Okay. So Russia, U.S. presidential election, reaction in Trump camp to recent negative publicity about Russian interference and likely resulting tactics going forward. Summary, Trump campaign insider reports recent DNC email leaks were aimed at switching Sanders' protest voters away from Clinton and over to Trump. Admits Republican campaign underestimated resulting negative reaction from U.S. liberals, elite, and media, and forced to change course as a result. Need now to turn tables on Clinton's use of Putin as boogeyman in election, although some resentment at Russian president's perceived attempt to undermine USG and system over and above swinging presidential election. The detail, speaking in confidence on 9th of August 2016, an ethnic Russian associate of Republican U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump discussed the reaction inside his camp and revised tactics therein resulting from recent negative publicity concerning Moscow's clandestine involvement in the campaign. Trump's associate reported that the aim of leaking the DNC's emails to WikiLeaks during the Democratic convention had been to swing supporters of Bernie Sanders away from Hillary Clinton and across to Trump. These voters were perceived as activists and anti-status quo and anti-establishment, and in that regard, sharing many features with the Trump campaign, including visceral dislike of Hillary Clinton. I don't blame them anyway. This objective had been conceived and promoted inter alia, whatever that is, by Trump's foreign policy advisor, Carter Page, who had discussed it directly with the ethnic Russian associate. Continuing on this theme, the ethnic Russian associate of Trump assessed that the problem was that the Trump campaign had underestimated the strength of the negative reaction from liberals and especially the conservative elite to Russian interference. This was forcing a rethink and a likely change of tactics. The main objective in the short term was to check Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton's successful exploitation of the Putin as boogeyman uh, Russian interference story to tarnish Trump and bolster her own patriotic credentials. The Trump campaign was focusing on tapping into support in the American television media to achieve this, as they reckon this source had been underused by them to date. However, Trump's associate also admitted that there was a fair amount of anger and resentment within the Republican candidates' team at what was perceived by Putin as going beyond the objective of weakening Clinton and bolstering Trump by attempting to exploit the situation to undermine the U.S. government and democratic system more generally. It was unclear at present how this aspect of the situation would play out in the weeks to come. This is 10th of August, 2016. Russia-U.S. presidential election. Further details of Trump lawyer Cohen's secret liaison with the Kremlin. Kremlin Insider reports Trump lawyer Cohen's secret meeting with Kremlin officials in August of 2016 was and were held in Prague. Russian parastatal organization Russo Trudnikestov, I don't know, used as cover for this liaison and premises in Czech capital may have been used for the meeting. Pro-Putin leading Duma figure Kosachev reportedly involved as plausibly deniable facilitator and may have participated in the August meetings with Cohen. In detail, speaking to a compatriot and friend on 19th of October 2016, a Kremlin insider provided further details of reported clandestine meetings between Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's lawyer Michael Cohen and Kremlin representatives in August of 2016. Although the communication between them had to be cryptic for security reasons, the Kremlin insider clearly indicated to his or her friend that the reported contact took place in Prague, Republic. Continuing on this theme, the Kremlin insider highlighted the importance of the Russian parastatal organization Russo Trudnikestva, I don't know, in this contact between Trump campaign representatives and Kremlin officials. That name was being used to cover for this relationship, and its office in Prague may well have been used to host the Cohen Russian presidential administration or the PA meetings. It was considered a plausibly deniable vehicle for this, whilst remaining entirely under Kremlin control. The Kremlin insider went on to identify leading pro-Putin Duma figure Konstantin Kosachev, head of the Foreign Relations Committee, as an important figure in the Trump campaign Kremlin liaison operation. Kosachev also plausibly deniable being part of the Russian legislature rather than an executive had facilitated the contact in Prague, and by implication may have attended the meeting with Cohen there in August. Company comment. We reported previously in our company intelligence report 2016/135 of 19th of October of 2016 from the same source that Cohen met officials from the PA legal department clandestinely in an EU country in August of 2016. This was in order to clean up the mess left behind by Western media revelations of Trump ex-campaign manager Manafort's corrupt relationship with the former pro-Russian Yanukovych, regime in Ukraine, and Trump foreign policy advisor Carter Page's secret meetings in Moscow with senior regime figures in July 2016. According to the Kremlin advisor, these meetings were originally scheduled for Cohen in Moscow, but shifted to what was considered an operationally soft EU country when it was judged too compromising for him to travel to the Russian capital. And this is 20th of October 2016. So I'm going to stop it here and then I'll finish up probably in a little bit. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.